Hello everyone. The other day I was driving home from a long drive in the Mercedes, about an hour or so, and just as I parked up I noticed a little bit of steam and condensation coming off the bonnet. So I opened it up and had a look, and turned out the coolant temperature sensor port was bubbling a whole lot of coolant out of it. After a few minutes it made a big puddle on the floor. I tried to pull it out and put it back in and see if it would fit back in, but it turns out it wouldn't go back in at all, no matter how hard I pushed, and there was no way for it to click in place. And I think there ended up being a missing clip or retainer clip after looking online, and it was very hard to source that replacement clip, so I thought, why not just purchase the whole new thermostat, just as much as shipping a new clip to New Zealand. So let's go through that. It's a bit of a laborious job, but it's fairly doable with minimal tools. Now, obviously here I am opening the bonnet. A good tip if you have a Mercedes and you're not already aware, unclip the two silver metal brackets at the hinges that hold them down, and you can open the bonnet 90 degrees, and it really helps giving room when you're working on it. Now the thermostat is quite easy to access. It's right at the front of the engine. There are three main hoses that connect to it. This front one that I'm undoing here is by far the easiest of them all. It's got this metal retainer. I don't know why they all don't have that. They should all have that, but that one came off really easily. There's a little bit of gunk in them, I noticed, so I cleaned that out. Now there's a few brackets and things around the thermostat that you've got to take off and move around to give yourself space. The main one is the harness that goes directly over top of the thermostat. There's a few clips you can undo to get that plastic cover off it. You can't move it. You can't move the harness itself. You can try and wiggle it around to give yourself more room, but it won't go that far. But getting the plastic cover off can help. And I also noticed the air intake hose was in the way of a lot of the screws and components around the thermostat, so I undid the plastic bit at the front of the car, and because the hose doesn't come off very easily coming out of the engine, I had to move it out of the way, and that seemed to do the trick. The brackets underneath that plastic shield need to be unhooked with a flathead or something similar. You have to bend it one way and then pull the other way, so it can be a bit annoying. Now here I am trying to remove the two smaller hoses that connect to the thermostat. These are fairly easy to do. For some reason one of the clamps that hold the hoses on is a different one to the other one. So this first one is just a hose clamp that you can unscrew with a flathead. That one's really easy and you pull it off. And the second one is a more conventional hose clamp that you have to use a set of pliers for, adjustable pliers, and that also comes off fairly easily. And it can be helpful to unclip the bracket that holds in these three lines. Just remember to put it back and put them back in the same order. Now I stupidly forgot the shorter extension for my 3/8 inch ratchets. I ended up having to use this longer extension, which made it quite a lot more difficult than it should have been. Make sure you have a shorter one that you can use that fits in there a bit easier. If I remember correctly, the E-Torx size was E10. You should really have a full set because some of the other screw sizes are a different size anyway. Now there are three screws that hold the thermostat in. One of them's up the top, quite easy to see. There's one just below that one. You have to remove that front engine cover to get to it. And there's one round the side near the oil filter. That one's quite easy to get to. They're all fairly easy to get to if you've got the right size extension. And then here I am undoing the hoses. So There's one hose at the bottom and one hose at the back. Those two hoses are much harder to get at than the main one at the front. You have to get your pliers in the right angle and try and slide the hose clamp off. And then once you've got those two harder hoses off, and once you've unclipped the two electrical connections, it's really just a matter of pulling and prying and trying to get it out. It can be really hard to get the hoses off the thermostat, even if you've got the clamps off. So it probably requires a lot of pulling and a lot of time. Once you've undone all of the hoses and also the two electrical connections, it's really just a matter of pulling at the thermostat and trying to get the hoses off. Even if you've undone the hose clamps, the hoses are on there really tight and they need to be pulled off with a lot of force. So it took me a while, and unfortunately I didn't record it, but it will eventually come out after a bit of force. And now here's a time lapse of me putting the whole thing back in again. Essentially it is the same thing in reverse. The hoses are again hard to put back on. They fit on really tight, and the hose clamps in particular are quite hard to get over the hoses and secure the hoses back in, mainly due to the awkward angle. What I ended up doing was removing the oil filter to get on that back hose clamp. That gave me a little bit more room. You can also do that if you're struggling to get it off in the first place. And then I won't bore you with this one too much. This is probably sped up something like 20 times speed. It was a real pain trying to get those hose clamps back on in the right position. It was really, really hard. Even with the right tools, I had both adjustable pliers and vice grips. And it was really hard to force them over the thermostat hose. And finally, the three screws can go back in now. They're fairly easy to put back in. They go back in the way they came off. It is important to remember two of them have brackets that hold electrical connectors on them, so they need to be put back in the right position, and the electrical connectors need to be slid back onto them afterwards. It can be a little bit tight, stretching the cables to slide back on, but you'll get there eventually. And then here I am just finishing up the final touches, making sure everything's in the right position, snapping on that last front hose. It goes on so unbelievably easily. I do not know why the others aren't like that. And clipping back into place anything that I unclipped before, including that the air intake section, and getting the vehicle ready to start up. And the front engine cover slides down first. The bottom clips are up and down clips. They slide down into their holders, and then the top two clips push in towards the engine. Now topping the coolant up was really easy. It lost quite a lot from the thermostat leak that I had. Yours might have lost more or less. I ended up needing to put in about 3 litres worth of coolant. And I luckily had the perfect amount. I used a concentrate. Make sure you look at the specs of the concentrate and make sure it meets the specs of the car. And make sure you dilute it to the right amount if you need to dilute it. Some of them do 1:1, others do 1:2. On this particular vehicle I needed probably 3 litres. And I didn't realise I'd lost so much. I don't know where it all went. But essentially what we're doing is we're topping it up until we get the coolant level in the reservoir to meet the metal pins in there, and there's a bit of a level indicator. And then turn the car on, let the engine run for a bit. I let it warm up, and I held the throttle constant at about 1,500 RPMs to simulate driving. Got it up to temperature a little bit, put the aircon on, and set the temperature to high, and then put the airflow direction to just the main front air vents, so that I could feel when warm air is coming out, and that helps circulate the coolant, make sure it's actually being used and that it's pumping the coolant through the engine and soaking up that heat. And then you might notice the coolant level goes down a bit, and you need to top it up again each time it goes down to make sure it stays at the correct level. And after a while, and after using almost all of the coolant that I had, it just about met that level, which was perfect. I ended up taking it for a drive, and it actually, after a long drive, it actually needed a little bit more after that, so I went out and bought more. So just keep an eye on it after you've finished the job. And once that's done, put everything back together, make sure everything's fastened, and you're ready to drive safely. And so that's it, all done. It did end up fixing the issue. There's no more leaks. I've checked and made sure there's no seepage anywhere around the thermostat. The coolant temperature is perfect. It stays at the 90 degrees that it needs to be, and had no issue since. The whole thing cost me about 150 New Zealand dollars, which is very reasonable. Probably something like 80 British pounds or 100 US dollars. So yeah, definitely not a big issue.